All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Bayyinah and Friends. I'm Franz Court Jr., author, publisher with Thoroughbred Books. And, it's Thursday, June 18th, 2020. And today we have a very special guest along with our very own Professor Bayyinah Bello. Professor James Small joins us today to have a very interesting, introspective conversation along with Professor Bello. So I'm looking forward to it. And I'm just going to remove myself for now and let my Bello, Professor Bayyinah Bello, take it from here.
Thank you, Franz. Thank you very much. Greetings to all. On a respect pour tout le monde. Nan tous les ancêtres yo, qui te créé, qui te gourmet, qui te bâti. Et puis, li te nou pas péri. Nan tout si la, qui te choisi marcher, courir, en bon moment. Si yo ta son bout, kote yo ta tracé ou liberté dit yo. In the name of those ancestors who invented, built, fought, and struggled, so African children will not be erased on our planet Earth. In the name of those who chose to rush up and kiss death rather than live without freedom, I greet you, all the friends and supporters of Bayyinah and Friends. Our guest today is Professor James Small, my partner in victory. How do I view him? During all the years that our paths have crossed, I picked up the Marasa energies from him, as well as the Dambala and Ogu energies. Therefore, looking at him, I see the eternal, playful child, the river of knowledge, as well as the power of transformation. Be mindful, the most dangerous part of him is that playful child. Today, you will have the opportunity to toquer la parole with him. Toquer la parole is an expression that means talk, which is sort of disappearing. So I like to go back and catch them and bring them back. So toquer la parole with him and sharpen your eyesight so you may discover some of the many other strong personalities alive in this man. In the name of Fondation Félicité, all of the FF volunteers, a number of admirers of Professor Small have already emailed. I say to you, Jumbo, Professor James Small. Alafia, Hotep, Assalamu alaikum, Sanu. Welcome to Bayyinah and Friends, my beloved brother, and please do take the time to greet your admirers.
So I'm coming downstairs to make sure I've got better and good reception. But Hotep, peace and blessings to all of the brothers and sisters, and to my little sister Bayyinah and brother Franz. But it's always an honor to work with Sister Bayyinah to try and bring truth and try and bring knowledge to our people. Without knowledge, of course, we perish, we die. And knowledge of self is the absolute of the knowledge that we need to have and be able to comprehend. And so I'm just honored that Bayyinah has asked me to join her again to try and talk to you about things that would help us change ourselves and change our world. So thank you, my beloved sisters, and greetings to everyone.
Thank you, Brother James. One of our topics today is freedom. Now, listen to my intonation. I didn't say freedom. I said freedom? We will be Toke La Paoli talk on what is it, what it is not. When do we recognize it? When do we hold it? When and how do we lose it? How about you read the English version of this powerful poem, Brother James?
I have to get to it.
Okay. So while he's getting to it, let me remind you, this is a poem written nearly 5,000 years ago. Franz is right on thing. He has it on the screen. So we don't have to even look for it. We all could look at it together. But go ahead, except that we don't see the question mark here. It's vital. It's not freedom, it's freedom. Let's talk about, let's think about it, let's analyze it, let's question it. They did not make a declaration of freedom. They invited all of us to think about it and know what is freedom. So that question mark is absolutely indispensable. Okay, let's go. Maybe I'll start. And whenever you're ready, you can take over, Professor Small. Freedom. Our first mistake was that we thought of freedom as a place rather than continuation of a struggle. Our first mistake, we thought of freedom as a place rather than continuation of a struggle. Now look at the second paragraph. What does it say? That second paragraph, very short, very clear. What does it say?
Tyranny never sleeps.
Absolutely. So, can I take my freedom and say, now that I'm free, let me go to bed and go to sleep and let me have a party? Now I'm free. Can we do that?
No.
Absolutely
No.
not.
By the time you wake up, what will happen to you?
You're a slave again.
Slaughter.
Tyranny would have come back and take away your freedom. So freedom is not a thing. You cannot hold it. You cannot put it someplace. You can only have that energy and work with it and fight with it. Brother James, can you take the next paragraph? Our second mistake. All right, I'll continue. Our second mistake was that
Sorry, Professor Small was muted.
Aha.
Let me go again.
Okay, now I can, yes, go
Our
ahead.
second mistake was that we thought of freedom as a goal rather than as a launching pad from which to reach our goal.
Ha.
Without purpose, freedom hardly matters.
Without purpose, freedom hardly matters. What does that mean?
And a lot of times when we see the call for freedom, we hear the discussion on freedom, we do take it as a goal, like, okay, we'll get there, it's done, it's over, the world is good. But the purpose, what is our purpose? And our purpose should always be, and it'll be concluded in this dialogue, we are to be free to self-determine as individuals, to build healthy families, to build healthy neighborhoods, to build healthy communities, to build a healthy world that we live in. And that means we must talk about having a culture that represents the continuity and the continuation from even our first ancestor. And we build on those values. to construct our tomorrows. If we don't have that in mind and we think freedom is just the right to go shopping at somebody's store or sit in the restaurant or be able to get a good job with corporate America or to be able to sit in first class, those little silly things that we think is freedom. And at the end of the day, we have no families. It's been dissipated and destroyed. We have no neighborhoods. Even if we live in proximity to each other, we don't even know each other. We don't associate. We have no culture. So we have no tools to bind us together and remind us of who we are and what our relationship should be to one another. Those are just some of the goals.
Excellent. So let's go to the next paragraph. Our third mistake
was that we thought that freedom made us free. That, however, is a license, not freedom at all.
Not freedom at all. And our conclusion is the conclusion of Amunhotep, Ethiopian philosopher, who was thinking about freedom more than nearly 5,000 years ago. What did he conclude?
He said, freedom is being shackled to identity. Freedom is being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. Meaning there is no goal. It is the pursuit itself. And to realize that this part where he says, to be shackled to identity, to be African, as Asa said, or not to be at all. And to have a purpose, and the purpose comes from our ancestors. They tell us what our purpose is. And when you lose connections and contact with your ancestors, you don't have a clue of where to go next because the purpose and the instructions, you never got them. So now you're living life, taking actions based primarily on your enemy's instructions, which does not propose for you a purpose that will make your life healthy.
Absolutely. So we can deduct from this text, in order to be free, A, we must know who we are, must have identity. B, you must continually have purpose. And C, you must have direction. What is direction? I want to be rich, so I go to Wild Parker's house and steal what she's got.
Oh, no, you
My
don't.
purpose was to be rich. Now I have what belongs to Wild Sparkles. Have I achieved freedom?
No, because the one thing we know, take those of us just in the United States, we're more wealthy than we've ever been in our history. For the last 7 years, we have spent as consumer dollars more than $1 trillion+ every year. That's more than any single African nation has as a GNP. And we are worse off than we was the week we left slavery. So we have all these things. We're the professors, we're the CEO, we're the director, we're the president, we run football teams, basketball teams. We are teaching everywhere. We're driving Mercedes and BMWs like we own the factories. We own $1 million homes all over the place. And yet in one split second, the lowest class of our oppressors in a uniform can take the life of the wealthiest, most educated member of our community, and we don't have the power to do anything except beg. And that's real. And it happens every day.
Good. Now, let's look at freedom. For those of us who are not too comfortable with English, let me give you a quick reading of the same text in our own tongue. Liberté, Premier RN fait, c'était quoi liberté te yon côté? En guise nous comprendre, li se yon lit k'ap rapousuiv pour tout temps vagen temps. Domination krasezo pa jam pran repos du tout. Deuxième RN fait, c'est que quoi liberté te yon objectif. En guise nous comprendre, li se yon ressort qui permet nous prendre élan pour nous arriver matérialiser objectif nous yo. Pour moun qui pa gen objectif, liberté pa gen aucun valeur. Li pa util yo en rien. Troisième RN fait, c'était quoi liberté te fen vin libe. Li pa fait ça du tout. Ça c'est rôle libertinage, c'est rôle laisser grainer. Pour yon moun libre, faut rete enchaîné ak identité pal. Faut gen yon objectif, la poursuivre dans une direction précise. Yon moun libre, l'el gen objectif la poursuivre tout temps, pour tout temps va gen temps. So everyone should be clear now on what is freedom. Freedom is continuous work. Freedom is continuously having a purpose that you are working towards. Freedom is that you have direction. You're not going to do anything to get there. No, you have what you do, what you will do. And then you have things that you will never do. Before we go any further, let me do my job. I have job in this program. Fondation Marie-Claire Rose Félicité Bonheur des Salines, Fondation Félicité. You can keep in touch with her via Twitter, Fondation Félicité, on Instagram, on official Bayyinah Bello YouTube channel, on www.fondationfelicité.com. That's the website if you want to know what they're doing, what we're doing. And if you wish to donate, then you use pourfondationfelicité@gmail.com. Now that I've done my duty, as required by my boss, Jerry, Surgeon Small, put on your mask, put on your gloves, take your scalpel, and let us dissect some lessons drawn from the reading of this mind-boggling poem. Let's just draw 2 or 3 lessons so that anyone who reads it, they should come out with those 3 things. Let's say 3.
Identity as one of the main things. We confuse identity with location. If you live in the United States, you say, I'm an American. Even if you live in Haiti.
By the way, I am an American. You know that, right?
No, I will get to that. But first, everything has context. Identity. If you live in Haiti and you say, I'm Haitian. If you live in Jamaica, you say, I'm Jamaican. But we have accepted as a universal identity is African. And that word African that we've accepted as a universal identity, which is a word that comes from Africa. It does not come from Rome or Europe. There's no such word in those languages. Then we're talking about understanding ourselves, going back to the original creation, to the first manifestation of the divine as a human being. It was an African woman. And out of that, everything else came. But not just in terms of the genealogy and the body and the cells. Something else has happened from then to now. Those persons we call ancestors developed a relationship between nature and them, between cosmology and them, and between them and other humans in the family. Rules and regulation that govern the building of character. Then that character creating rules, regulations, and rituals, which we call culture, which is primarily a people's education system. And if you are not within your culture, you are not within your own ancestral education system. So you're in someone else's. And that's where your purpose gets defined, the second thing. Once you're clear on your identity and who and what you are, and from what you emanated, your source. The ancient Egyptians call that the Wahemi Wasu, the first occasion, when life had its first manifestation. That's our genesis. And from there, we have been instructed through experiences, through histories, and through what our people got from those experiences and put together as our culture, meaning our governing tools, in order to create the human beings that we are, because that's what culture does. Culture allows you to constantly recreate yourself and expand that creation to be even a better self. But if you don't have that, then you're constantly entangled in someone else's notion of what the human character and creation is. And so in terms of purpose, that being purpose, married to identity, and then he said something else. He talked about directions. What is your directions? You know, we look at very complex things, but if I don't eat, in a few days I die. So having the ability to provide food for yourself and your family is essential. If I'm not properly clothed, depending on climate, I will be unhealthy. If I'm not properly housed and protected from the elements, I will be unhealthy. And so we kind of forget that food, clothing, and shelter is what we go to make money for. We get caught on, we're making the money and what we're doing to make the money, but what is the purpose of making that money in whatever culture or country you're in? And the purpose of making that money is to provide the food, clothing, and shelter for the organism that you are and your family. That should be the bottom line to everything. And from there, how do we sustain that ability? That means we've got to form families. What principles are those families going to be constructed on? Has to be on African principles that is proven and has been left to us by our ancestors. We call them religions, or we call them cultures. We could call them voodoo, we could call them Yoruba, or Candomblé. These are the bodies of laws of our relationship to cosmology and ecology and the human self, and how we should function to be a successful organism. And so I think when he deals with identity and he deals with purpose and he deals with direction, where do we go from here, for instance? Here we are in the middle of this thing called COVID, in the middle of all of the recent killings in the United States that we know about, and the people by the millions in the streets of the United States asking for changes. Where are we as an African people going to go? What are we thinking of? What are we going to do next? Are we going to say, oh, they had fired a few policemen, they made a few laws, we can go back to the status quo and be slaves again? Or are we going to take a look at who's controlling the economic, politics, and culture where we live that instruct these policemen to treat us the way we do and handicap the government so that they can't make rules to govern them? Because we don't control the community we're in, so we can't control the civil servants that work for that community. So what do? We still spend $1 trillion with anybody except African peoples. And they take that money at the end of the day, like Malcolm says, to another part of town. They don't invest in our community. They don't help build daycare center. They don't build schools in our community. They don't do anything in our community except get the money and leave. We have to make some decisions on how we use the weapon of the capital that's in our hands. And the other decision we have to make, and be very discreet about that decision, is how we use the political apparatus where we are, because it's about economic, politics, and culture no matter where you are. And if you don't understand those three things, and if you don't understand how to bring them into a space where they represent the one African-ness, and it can work for the interest of the one African survival, then you're just working for other people's interests. Every culture have a polity. Every culture have their expanded culture. Every culture has an economic base. How do you use that for yourself where you live? How do you get control of land, labor, and resources where you live? How do you get true control of economic politics and culture where you live? How do you decide that you will be responsible and that you're capable of providing food, clothing, and shelter where you live? Because at the end of the day, if those things are not together, it does not matter what you got, what you own, how much you owe, or where you live. You're a slave.
Thank you. Clear. So, as brother ended on just the word we need, you're a slave. Let's look at some of our pictures as slaves and different forms of slavery. There are many, many different forms, but maybe Francis is ready to show us some of our pictures that we should never forget. Now, to me, that's the number one picture. If we can always remember how many of our people, women and men, children and adults, who had the writings on their backs like that and had to live with this every day of their lives. And after a while, my reflection take me to say, well, he was lucky because all of these sores, all of this hurt was only on his back. Me, I have them right here. I have them in my mind. As we go to their schools, memorize their information, our brain become this way, like the back of this man. So if we become conscious of where the slavery sits in our body, spirit, or mind, then we can also undo it. But if you think, no, not me, you don't have a chance. But if you say, yeah, my sores are here, my sores are there, then you can start to heal yourself. Let's take a couple more pictures. So those of us who don't know what Euro-Christian slavery has done, we can have a clear picture. Now, this was a very ordinary thing. In the Congo, for example, there was no slavery, I hear. Whatever the game they played, the word games they played as to what they call Congo when the Belgians did whatever they wanted. But even though there was no slavery, the king of Belgium could decide, if you say, oh, there is the Herero people, one of them did this, he could decide, all right, how many of them are there? 6 million. Okay, I want you to kill all 6 million and cut their right arm, put it on a boat, send it to me so I can check that you actually did kill all 6 million. So you will find many of our people with a missing right arm. And they will find, Christians will find wonderful explanations for why this situation is the way it is. Shall we have another picture? Well, I don't know if Brother James has something to add. Please don't hesitate. Here we have.
I can't see the photographs, but I know the photographs in my head.
Okay.
And I know the situation in the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the worst forms of genocide to happen in the last 3 centuries. And no one even discusses it as having ever happened except us, where you kill 25 million people and get away with it. And what should be known is that Leopold of Belgium, who got the rest of those who had made the agreement at the Berlin Conference to divide Africa, to give him personally the Congo. Most of his investors, most of the bankers that invested in him was American and British bankers, with most of them being American bankers and Wall Street brokers. So they are as responsible for that genocide as was Leopold.
Are you talking about the good Christians I know?
Oh, well, absolutely. The good Christians, the good Jews, and the good Muslim monies. You remember when we were children, they taught us about a man named Stanley and Livingston, and that this man, Stanley, who was a reporter, goes to Congo and finds Dr. Livingston and goes, Dr. Livingston, I presume. They had all of us reciting that in school. Well, the man who explored and led the first expedition into the Congo and started the genocide was this very Mr. Stanley that Leopold hired. The same man they have us praise in school in the Stanley Livingston saga. Well, Mr. Stanley is the one who did the initial incursion with his mercenary army on behalf of Leopold, and he set up that system of genocide for Leopold. Just a little tidbit of history we should know. And the American bankers and Wall Street brokers financed all of that genocide for the sake of the mining products of the Congo ending up in the United States of America. So I can see Bayyinah look frozen her screen. But what's the next slide, Franz? I can't see the picture, so if you describe it. Okay, Bayyinah's fine.
It's the so-called father of gynecology who used to experiment on African women slaves,
Right.
enslaved African women, and he's appeared everywhere, has monuments all over the place, but they never talk about the torture that he implemented on African enslaved women.
Right. They just took his statue down, I think, last week in New York, or voted to take the statue down last week. This is a man who would perform surgery on our women without any anesthesia at all. And much of the knowledge that they've learned about gynecology came from this torture and genocide against Black women. But they don't put that in their medical journals or their medical books. But it is a part of this false notion. I never use the term white supremacy, because anything supreme does not have to exert itself. The false notion of white supremacy that's carried out on behalf of these inferior people because of their own
indeed.
And they know their inferiority, they strike out against anyone else, especially the African, which is the foundation of even their beings. But the kind of crime that have been committed in order to have the Empire State Building and the Third World Center and all these fancy hotels we have in America, and beautiful Broadway and these magnificent theater, all of it is African blood money. That's our blood that built all of this crap. London, New City, Paris is all dripping with African blood. None of them did they build on their own. None of the wealth came from Europe. All of the wealth came from committing genocide against people in India, Africa, and the Americas, in particular Africa. And they're still doing it.
Yes, indeed. Let's take a break from the horror and talk a little bit about Professor Small himself. Put us some of our divine pictures up on the wall. Let's get rid of this for now, but I don't want you to forget. I want you to remember, keep the pictures inside. Professor Small.
Why can't I see the pictures, Franz? If you describe it, I can tell you what it is.
No, right now we're not dealing with pictures. We're just you and I. I have some questions for you, Professor Small.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who am I?
Exactly. That's where we're gonna go.
Okay. I am the great-grandson of a Mendi woman. We call her Maho. I'm a Mendi, 100% in my mitochondrial DNA. My people live in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Mali. On my great-grandfather's side, I'm a Tutsi. He came from the Rwanda, Uganda area with his mom when he was about 4 years old and enslaved in South Carolina and Virginia, escaped at 16 and kept his family free from there on. That family married into a Maroon family where I get the name Small. We call it the Freewood people, meaning they ran into the woods and made themselves free. So they call the Freewood people. My grandmother, my mother's mother, in whose house we all grew up, was a traditional priestess. We call them root women in South Carolina, a part of the nation, the amalgamation of Yoruba, Akan, Congo, Igbo, Angola that became the Gullah people and the Geechee people along the coast of Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. I grew up on a plantation down there. Worked on a plantation until I left to go in the military at 18. Went to a one-room classroom with one teacher who's my beautiful beloved. She's 98 years old next week. She taught me from the first to the sixth grade. And then I went to an all-Black school in the city of Georgetown, South Carolina, with all Black teachers who loved me, cared for me. I lived in a Black world. I didn't know a white world except when we had to work for them. And we were not allowed by my grandfather's rules to have any association with whites other than business. When your business with them is finished, you come back to your home, to your community. And so I come out of that. I met Malcolm X at the age of 16, 1963. I got railroaded into the military. He was assassinated while I was in France, waiting to hear his lecture. I came back home the next year, joined the organization, became his sister's bodyguard. 2 months later, I was voted in as the imam over the Muslim Mosque Inc. at age 21. That was his new mosque. And I led that mosque for 11 years actively. I was known then as Al-Hajj Amin Shahid. I've been to Mecca twice, 74, 75. I worked with the Black Panther Party. I worked with the Black Liberation Army. I'm not ashamed of it. I was the comrade of Lumumba Shakur, Zaid Shakur, Matula Shakur, Sada Shakur, involved in our comradeship. I worked in Harlem very extensively. You know, I helped the Panthers open their first breakfast program, and I established the second breakfast program. I worked at City College, was a part of the largest student takeover in the history of America. 19 colleges and City University, held them for 2 weeks and got all of our demands. We created what you now know as open admissions. And so that's my grandchildren. I come out of that, out of struggle. I've been involved in I remember when I first helped with my first teacher, my first voodoo instructor, Rulas Maryland, to try to take arms to Haiti to overthrow Duvalier. And the CIA thwarted us twice and took our ammunitions when we were down in Florida. So all my life has just been involved in struggle, involved in trying to learn how to teach, and then involved in teaching and trying to keep a stability, to raise a family, keep some balance, keep some harmony in your life. Me and my comrades own a hotel in Africa for the last 15 years in Ghana. 80 of us. And imagine 80 Black people working together for 15 years without dissipating, but we managed to do it. We worked on multiple programs in multiple parts of Africa. I'm a part of an organization, and we decided lately we'll talk about ourselves more. We've been together for 38 years. We're called the Sons of Africa. And we exist. I also worked as a member of the OAAU, which was another organization Malcolm started. But that's my life. I taught at City University for 20 years. I was an administrator there for 16 years. That's been my life, just working in your community, working in Africa, working in the Caribbean, working with the NJAC people and the Emancipation Day people in Trinidad, but Aintu Springer and the others. Worked with Maurice Bishop during the period just before Maurice got killed. I was supposed to go with some other brothers to open up their continuing education program in Grenada just before Maurice was killed. So that's been my life. I've been involved in these things in these ways all of my life. It's the only life. It's the most beautiful life anybody could have dreamt of having. Struggling for your people, learning what you don't need. You know what I'm saying? I'm used to owning one pair of shoes, one pair of sneakers, two pairs of jeans, and one suit for those occasions. And that was always enough for me. You know, I've been married for 50 years. So Bayyinah has to unmute. Unmute, Sister Bayyinah.
Yes, thank you. Now, next question. We're asking you to look ahead 25 years. What do you see? Who are you? What are you doing 25 years from now?
25 years from now, I think I will be an ancestor by then. And hopefully with the 23 grandkids I got and all the kids they're gonna give birth to, I'll be back sooner than later. Our tradition teaches us that there is no such thing as death, that we go and we come. And when this temple, which houses the energy and the spirit, that is us, becomes damaged or worn down or worn out and can no longer contain the energy, we must let that matter go. But that energy will find another house. And in our tradition, we don't come back as a bird or a fish or anything. We come back in the same family line we were first on earth in. And we come back to that same family in the form of a grandchild or great-grandchild or great-grandchild. And when we do, we continue our cycle of development. There's even a process that the Alowo is called in Yoruba that says you have 8 times to come and go in that birth-death cycle to develop yourself to the point where you can be an Orisha or a revered ancestor, and you don't have to come back here anymore. But it is the quality and attributes of character, learning to absorb the Loas and the Orishas in your behavior so that you mimic them in your character and your actions that will determine the quality of being you have become. And so I believe in that from the bottom of my heart. I don't believe in it. I know it to be fact because I've got my mother walking around my house with me. She's 10 years old now. I got my grandfather, her father walking around. He's 4 years old now. I know it's them, and we know the signs to recognize them. So 25 years from now, I'll be in the ancestors telling them what our troubles are down here and who they need to send to help resolve some of these problems.
Thank you. All right. We're going to show you it's not only one. There are many. Liberty, freedom was something that we debated time and time over. We could find texts from different areas. But I also want to share with you today the Mundane Charter. The Mundane Charter is a sort of a declaration of abolition of slavery. And in the early 13th century, around 1221, following a major military victory over Arabs, the founder of the Mandingo Empire and the assembly of his wise men proclaimed in Kurukanfuga the new Mundane Charter. And we'll go directly to the information because it is absolutely, these are things, if we had them, if we were raised with them, we would handle our lives here much better now. The very first element that I have picked out from the Menden, I took 7 points out, but 4 of them I translated in English so we could share 4 or 5. Okay, number 1 is respect for life. Listen attentively what we said in 1221. All human life is a life. It is true that a life may appear into existence before another, but a life is neither older nor more respectable than another. As such, a life isn't worth more than another life. So you see, we, in the very conception of our thoughts, we put all life at equal. All life is equal. The second element says, reparation of wrongs done to others. 1221, reparations of wrong done to others. All life forms being equal in value, all wrong caused to another life must demand reparation. Therefore, no one should harm her neighbor for the heck of it. No one has the right to harm anyone, nor to create pain, martyrdom for another person. This is how we felt about things in 1221. Third one, family. Our brother just spoke about that. Family spirit and the importance of education, real education, not recitation, not repetition. Family spirit and the importance of education. Each must watch out for his neighbor. Each must watch out for his neighbor. Each must venerate those who gave them life. Each must educate her children. Each must provide the needs of all the members of his family. We are each responsible for each other. The fourth one, we'll look at love of one's nation. That everyone looks out for and secures the land of their fathers. Because every country or land that will see its humans disappear from it will decline and become desolate. So the land itself, there is a strong attachment between the land and the people of that land. So when many people are taken away from their land, then there is desolation, there is decline, both in the land and the people. And the last one we'll touch today, abolishment of slavery and famine. Abolishment of slavery and famine. They come together. Famine is a horrible thing. Slavery is an atrocious thing as well. There are no worse calamities than those two in the world. As long as we'll have our weapons, famine will kill no one in our empire. War will never destroy our villages to capture slaves again. Here, our great-great-great-grandpa from 1221 said, he set things up so no one can come back and capture our people again as slaves. As long as they have their weapons, they will continue to fight. This is to say that no one will ever place bit in the mouth of his neighbor to go sell him or her. No one will be beaten in the mundane empire, nor put to death because he is the son or daughter of a slave. Now, these are things we dealt with long time ago. So, Brother Small, what do you say? I know some of you are working on reparation, but if we knew that in 1221, it was already said, reparation is a must when you have wronged others. Is your mic on? You on mute? Okay.
Yes, we're dealing with a ruling elite of the world that is Judeo-Christian in their orientation. And what that ruling elite have been successful in doing is making many of the African former captive of theirs Judeo-Christian thinkers. We think of religion as an aside, but religion is a culture that has its own value system. And that value system always favor the creator of that culture. And so when we take that into account, we begin to understand that it is, when I said it years ago, people got very angry, that you cannot be a Christian and an African too. That you cannot be a Muslim and an African too. Even though this document was done by those who was practicing Islam of that day, even though they transformed their Islam in Africa considerably, yet not enough. So when I had the discussion in America now about reparations, there's a few people in government now listening, but the majority of government is saying, we have no intentions of ever giving reparations. The majority of the Judeo-Christian whites and blacks are saying there should be no reparations because they're coming out of what Dr. Nobles called, for the black people, a shattered consciousness and a fractured black or African identity. And because of that shattered consciousness, meaning we don't have a body of knowledge about our past, about our ancestors, about our history, that makes us a whole being that can self-determine and self-define. And because we have a fractured identity, when we started out, you remember I said American, and so someone said, well, who you are? I said, I'm an African American. And they said, well, you can't be, you're just an African. Well, America is just a geopolitical place. Africa is my race. And I'm clear, my race dictates my value system. My race dictates my belief system. My race dictates the action I must take in behalf of that belief system. And what you just read was an African king speaking from an African value system, laying out how Africans must behave under certain circumstances. But most of our people, though genetically are African, we are psycho-spiritually Judeo-Christians. And so the belief system that governs how we reach conclusions and make decisions leads to this shattered consciousness and this broken black identity that do not allow us to exercise power over ourselves. As again, my brother Dr. Noble says, power is the ability to define your reality and have other people accept your definition of yourself as if it were their own. And we cannot do that because the thing that gives you that power to define who you are is a knowledge of your history, a knowledge of your ancestry, and to be instructed and informed by that ancestry. What you just read was an instruction and an information from our ancestors telling us how we ought to behave if we're to be free and successful. How many of us, even for me, this is the first time I've heard those instructions. Yet I've practiced a lot of those instructions, hearing them in small pieces from other places, to know that in the 12th century, our ancestors were deliberate enough to write down those instructions for the future. But we don't know our ancestors' instructions. We know our ancestors' enemies' instructions, which is not in either us or our ancestors' interests.
Thank you. Yes, yes, indeed. Now, I'd like for us to look at this part that says famine and slavery. Why do they put slavery and famine together?
Well, then that's a very tough one.
Calamities in this world.
Right. Because without food, we can't go but a few days. Famine is not just the food that we eat, but famine changes the ecology. It destroys the plant life, which destroys the animal life, which destroys the insect life. We think insects are pests, but insects are a friend to the very plant's growth that we use to nourish our bodies. It destroys the ability for that environment, like the Sahara, for instance, to even produce rain. Because we think rain comes from the sky, but rain comes from the earth and go to the sky and then come back down again. And so if the earth have been damaged, it can't protect itself anymore. And in slavery, we are caught in that same situation. When you're incarcerated, you can't protect yourself anymore. You can't self-determine anymore. You can't declare your freedom anymore. You can't own your identity anymore. You can't promise tomorrow to your children anymore. You know, you're turned into a barren situation, like a barren land, because they've taken away your ability to self-determine, you know, through fear, through disorientation, through physical brutality. And at the end of the day, when I remember in 1992, most people don't know, I coined the term post-slavery trauma syndrome. And I coined that term back in 92 because I was trying to describe something I saw in my classroom. There was a young lady who came to class every day, and it was winter, and she wore these dark glasses. So I kept telling her, why don't you take it off? She would not. So one day, I asked her to stay after class, and I took the glasses off. And I saw the bruises and contusions on her eyes, what she was suffering at home. And so I called the Sons of Africa, and we paid a visit to that gentleman and show him what it feels like to do that to a woman. And then we had him arrested and thrown out of her place, you know? And when I had talked to her, the things she said to me about why she took it reminded me of the, not the Helsinki syndrome, but whatever that syndrome soldiers had to go through when they were punished, the Stockholm syndrome. And the concept of that is that when someone is abusing you and you can't fight against the abuse, you take on the identity of the abuser to lessen the pain of the abuse. Then I realized that's what we did in slavery. And we were carrying it forward in our everyday life as normal culture, but it may have helped us then, but it's killing us now. And the day I got married in Malcolm X's sister's bedroom. And when my mother and my wife walked out the door, Ella called me back and says, I got something to tell you. And I said, what is that? She says, I'm going to tell you two things. Don't make your wife a whore, and never let anybody know how much you love her. Well, the first part I got, don't make your wife a whore. But it baffled me for years. Don't let anybody know how much you love her. But that was a carryover from slavery, that we couldn't show affection, that we couldn't show adoration, we couldn't show admiration for one another, because the enemy would see that and would tear us apart. And we brought that into our everyday today. And so many of the habits we were forced to develop in slavery, we have brought forward into the future, but they injure us now. They damage us now. And as a part of that psycho-spiritual fear and tyranny that's embedded in our subconscious. And only your culture, only a knowledge of history, only a knowledge of ancestry will help you heal that and wipe that out of you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, one element I would add, famine is also a weapon used against people to bring them down so they can bring on slavery. Mm-hmm. By keeping you hungry, by destroying your vegetation, your plants, your whatever, then You know, they can say to you, well, if you want to eat, you're going to have to do this. So it is a weapon. And that's why I will always be grateful to the Nation of Islam, who taught me that you could eat once a day and you will not die. You can even eat once every 48 hours and you'll be okay. And that gives you self-control. When you can determine when you eat, what you eat, under what circumstances you eat. It's great self-control. Thank you very, very much. We have, well, I remind you again, Fondation Félicité. If you want to stay in touch with Fondation, I don't know, this week, look like Francis left the info. Anyway, you can catch up with us on WhatsApp with 509-2940-0869. You can, there's the website, fondationfelicite.com. And to donate, it's pourfondationfelicite@gmail.com. Now, we come to we have to do it quickly so our people will have enough time for their questions. So we'll take just two articles from something called, are you listening?
Yes, Mama, we listening.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We are now going to look at
Yes, we're listening.
a text that is the Imperialism Charter, the Charter of Imperialism. Yeah, some people say, oh no, they wouldn't write it. Oh no, it can't be. Well, if I can see it with my eyes, and then I find it written down, and I know people know how to write, so I can use it and do whatever reflection I have to do. So Charter of Imperialism, Article 1, I skipped the introduction. Those who want to, if you contact us at Fondation Félicité, we will send you a copy. Article 1, from the currency of imperialism, governing the world and controlling the riches of the planet. Our policy is to divide to better rule, dominate, exploit, and plunder to fill our banks and make them the most powerful in the world. I suppose you guys recognize this brother here, this ancestor.
Yes.
And as we look at his picture, let me read for you Article 27 of this thing. The laws, resolutions, courts, and tribunals of the United Nations are our instruments of pressure against the leaders of countries which defend the interest of their people. That's not the one I wanted. There is one that is more vivid. Okay. There's one that says clearly, anyone that defends the interests of their people will be physically liquidated. So those of us who always doubt when crimes are being committed into our own eyes, under our own eyes, laws are there, they write them, and they do what they write. We must be aware. So, Brother James?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would tell people to get a good sense of how these laws were applied. Study the history of Johannes and Menelik in Ethiopia as they were defending themselves against the Italian invasion. Because while they're defending themselves against the Italian invasion, they're also negotiating their western flank against the French and the British coming down the Nile, and the Pasha Turkish army coming from the north. This is the beginning of the invasion after the Berlin Conference. And the greatest defender we have at this time is a man named Muhammad Ahmed, the Mahdi of Sudan, who they will eventually poison using a traitor. But not until he kills 30,000 of them in one day at the Battle of Khartoum. Thank God to our beautiful brother. But in the history around that, you will find the documents. When Italy was being defeated by Ethiopia, they sent an appeal to this body to enforce this document. And they were telling him, Italy, because Italy had done something that they were displeased with, that you have to negotiate with Menelik, at least back to the lines we agreed to before you transgress the original agreement. They, after the Berlin Conference, and this thing is really set in stone for them, all of the European powers refer to this document as a way of making the decisions on what they did in Africa. And in that period, it's discussed a lot because Menelik is telling Italy, we had an agreement about borders. We had an agreement about boundaries, and you've transgressed that. And these agreements was agreed to by this body that was working from the document they drew up coming out of the Berlin Conference. And a good book for some of this knowledge is a book called The Scramble for Africa. The Scramble for Africa, and a second book we call The Battle of Fasada. Fasada is an island in the Nile River. Whomever can control that island would control the flow of goods up and down the Nile. And so the British and the French was fighting for this control. And so history will remove a lot of the mysteries you have. From the beginning, they came up with a charter on how they were going to behave when every European army invaded Africa with the finances from the United States of America, who also committed many of their soldiers to fight as mercenaries on the side of the European armies during the invasion in the 1890s and the century beyond. So they have lived up to this document. It is practiced in Africa today. The best example of it is when the government, the people of Ivory Coast, elected as their president, Mr. Bagbo. And the Supreme Court of the Ivory Coast accepted that election as being valid and legitimate. And the United Nations, the American government, and the French government sided with a minority group who had lost the election, overthrew that government, and arrested Mr. Bagbo and tried to bring him before the World Court for crimes against humanity. So in that, they fulfill one of the things that they said in this document, that anyone that gets into office that we haven't sanctioned and that we didn't put in there, we will overthrow them and we will destroy them. And so they've done that to this day. And the man they put into power in Ivory Coast was an executive that they had schooled and trained who worked for the World Bank. He's currently the president of Ivory Coast now. And they're trying to make Ivory Coast pretend it is a normal African state that's doing well. But in this very document, and as Bayyinah says, you can get it from Felicite, you will see they outline how they will do these things, and they have been doing it. Haiti would be the other classic example of that, and what they did with the UN troops when they send them into Haiti to act as an occupation army. And they still are an occupation army that's operating in the interests of the same group of European bankers and nation state that signed that original document in Berlin and then have carried out these orders ever since. So I don't know if that's complete enough, Sister Bayyinah. But if not, the other place you can look at is Ghana with the government of Kwame Nkrumah. And Kwame Nkrumah was not their choice. They had a choice of 5 other men who was going to run the country as a British Commonwealth. And Nkrumah was the 6th person, and he broke away from the other 5 and moved towards total independence. And from the day he made that decision, they put him in prison. But then the people held an election and elected him while he was in prison, against the will of the imperialists. And from the day he stepped out of prison, they had been constructing and creating the architectural plans to overthrow his government and to kill him if they could. And they tried to kill him a number of times and failed. But they did succeed, the Americans and the British, in overthrowing the government and putting in place, until Jerry Rawlings came, what they wanted. And that means to run the nation for the sake of the West being able to access your raw materials at will. And no one, with all the crimes committed in Africa, all the crimes committed in Iraq, all the war crimes committed in Syria, no one is raising crimes against humanity or war crimes against the United States of America. And they say in this document that no matter what war crime they commit or what crimes against humanity they commit, they can never be brought before the World Court. And they have never been brought before the World Court. They brought some of Hitler's people before the World Court because Hitler violated their code of conduct. But most of the key people in the Hitler administration ended up in America and South America. And it was the American CIA who got thousands of them out of Germany, got them right here into the United States and in Paraguay and other places in the Americas. So much for destroying the Third Reich. The only people, we don't even know if Hitler died in a bunker. They've never shown us any proof of that. You know, so studying history, because history will get rid of the mystery. That book, The Scramble for Africa, is an excellent document. The Struggle for Fashada is an excellent document to look at what happened from the Berlin Conference coming forward, because it's still in force today. You know, the war in Namibia, SWAPO's great victory in Namibia to give freedom to their people. You know, when we look at the massacre and the murder and the crimes Germany committed in Namibia, even before the Third Reich, they had committed genocide all over Africa, but the largest genocide they committed was in Namibia. Most of us don't know the Namibian history, and so we don't know of this massive genocide. But you can find most of this stuff online today, because people are putting information out. And so you must know history. You must have a good understanding of a timeline of history. And you can see that they're doing everything. When you get this document from Bayyinah, you will see that everything that's stated in this document is in force today. And when we look at history, we will see that they have been using these things in history through time.
Didn't hear that.
Ma'am?
All right, Ma, you here? Can you hear us? Ma Bello, can you hear us? It looks like you're blacked out. We can't hear you and we can't see you. Oh, I think she just fell out. Okay, so she'll log back on, Professor Small. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Whenever you see, I mean, all of this stuff seems like it ties together with the tyranny never sleeps, the charter of imperialism, and you could see it playing out pretty much every day in this world. And it kind of seems like no one is being held, these governments that are the, you know, the ruling class now seem to be.
One of the pieces, Franz, that people are familiar with, we've heard this discussion that many of the Francophone countries, these are the countries who were colonized by France in West Africa, have put together a different financial arrangements. We knew that they were putting 75% of their monies into the French banks. And then this money would be loaned back to them. This is their money now that they deposit in the French bank, which will now be loaned back to them at exorbitant interest. They stated all of that in this document on how they would do that.
Yeah.
It's in this document on how they would do that. And even in the negotiations that some of the countries did, they changed the name of the money, but they really didn't change the process of depositing their money in the French banks. So it was like a sleight of hand thing to Black folks. And we think something has changed, which did not really change. And so we must study history. History is important. A good book also is our brother Robin Walker's book, When We Rule, an extraordinary document on our history. You can get it from Tony Browder, something called The Timeline by brother Paul Bayyinah out of the UK. He's a Nigerian brother out of the UK. But he created a timeline that goes back 2,000 years, but he uses the timeline to do historical survey on every period. The only person that sells it in America I know is Dr. Anthony Browder. But those two documents, Robin Walker's book, Paul's Timeline, and of course, what was the other two books? But you have the other two books I suggested earlier.
Yeah.
Kwame Nkrumah's document, Neo-Colonialism. In that document, Nkrumah describes the process and how it would work, and it has worked to a T, just like Nkrumah said it would. And that's what we're dealing with today. That's what you're dealing with in the Caribbean. That's what you're dealing with on the continent of Africa. And the Black communities in America, we are mere colonies. We are treated like enslaved colonies in the same way they would treat another country. You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. The organization that Malcolm X started, the last one that you mentioned,
the OAAU.
OAAU, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember he tried to bring a human rights case to the United Nations.
Well, that was the primary cause for his assassination by the CIA and the FBI. They, like I said earlier, they used black hands, but they were carrying out a policy and an action of the government of the United States itself, headed by J. Edgar Hoover at the time. He headed the death squad. He gave the order to kill Malcolm X, but he was in collaboration with the US State Department and the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. Did they use some black people to do it? You can get a guy who's scared to go to prison for life and get him to do a lot of things. You can even entrap somebody into a crime situation and say, if you want to get out of this situation, you're going to do this for me. You can even infiltrate the Nation of Islam and put your sleeper cells in there until you get ready to use them, like they've done to many of our organizations. But we've got to get smart enough in the study of history, smart enough to see how our enemy behaved, smart enough to remember what we studied, you know, so that we don't turn on each other and keep scavenging each other while he sits on the sideline and laughs.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
So,
okay, I think my Bello is back.
Okay, beautiful.
But
that document is essential to reach out to Marbello and Felicite. Everyone on this call should get a copy of this document. And I know you're going to love it, because the minute you read it, you're going to say, oh my God, that's what's going on. Because you'll see it all, but you'll see them putting it down in writing way back then, and we're living it today.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Professor Bello, are you here with us? I see you here, but you're on mute.
Thank you. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
And thank you very much, Professor Small.
It's my hard in your
absence, victory.
I tried.
My partner in victory. And we're going to go now with, give it back to Franz so our audience can have their chance to express themselves and share with us questions and comments.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, everybody, you guys know the deal. There's a raise hand icon in the participants screen. If you hit participants, you should see a wave or a hand, raise hand, it says. So you could go ahead and start filling in the questions in line. So first we have Clifton Henry. So Clifton Henry, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Clifton Henry. I see you're
Hello?
unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Guys hear me?
Yeah, speak a little louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Clifton. You just mute yourself again. We heard you the first time. All right, going once, going twice.
Peace, honor, respect.
All right, there you go.
Peace, honor, respect, family.
All right, honor.
I have questions for the both of you guys. Again, I'm very, very thankful for you guys in this platform. I've been following you guys on YouTube for some time. I've been trying to figure out how to get on live, but I figured it out on Instagram. And yeah, I have a question for both of you guys though. For Mama Bello, I have a question in regards to the waning moon. Is there any suggestions that you have for us that we can do during these times? I know the waning moon is something in regards to expelling or to get rid of. So I don't know if there's anything you could add for us with that. And then another question for Mama Bello would be in regards to altars. I have problems during my free time. I kind of get conflicted on what Lwa I should be talking to, because I feel like I speak to one Lwa when I'm outside, but I don't know if I should speak to the same Lwa when I'm inside my home. And in particular, the Lwa that I pour libation to and give the most appreciation to on my time outside is Jaka Menen, and that's a Lwa I learned through your teachings. But I just have a question on that. If there's anything you could add to that for me and my spiritual help, I would be very appreciated. For Professor Small, you mentioned about your intuition and how you know that your ancestors are speaking with you. I kind of get a lot of the feelings, but I'm very new to this. I feel like a lot of us who are in the chat room coming, from the Western world, we've been more tranquilized to learning Christianity before, our real roots. So I have some times where I feel like outside of my intuition, I feel like it's a feeling I get in my ears and my head when I'm being talked to through my ancestors. So Professor Small, could you kind of like elaborate on that a little bit? Is there a certain feeling you get when you know your ancestors are talking with you? And is it like something associated with like seeing numbers, sequences? That was just my question. I'm sorry. Probably was too long.
Okay. As far as I'm concerned, I would say put your question in the email. You would get more out of it if we can communicate in a more extensive way than, since we have, so many people who need to ask something, and this is very specific to you. Okay. So send me an email or WhatsApp, whichever way, whatever you have. I put my email there, Bayyinah Bello at Fondation Félicité. It's on the chat. ask your question, then you'll have an extensive answer.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, so let's go. Thank you, Clifton, for your question. All right, let's go to Jade. Jade Arundel. You could go ahead and unmute yourself, ask a question, please.
Yes, yes. Peace and Black Power, everybody. Thank you, Mom Bello and Professor Small. Hello. I'm a revolutionary, and I have a question. But before I ask my question, I do want to call in our new ancestor, Dr. Conrad Worrell, who is the founder, one of the founders of National Black United Front, which is an organization that I am a member of, and we're grateful for him. He made his transition on June 3rd of this year, actually this month. So, I've been out doing protesting. I've been doing political work in the community organizing, etc., consistently, working to replace the system of anti-Black racism with a system of justice. So this is my question. Why do we refer to Europeans as people when the historical record teaches us that they, as a group and a race, when history reflects that they lack humanity? And then culturally and spiritually speaking, is it permissible for the African to ignore or reject the human rights of Europeans?
Excellent question. Some of us have chosen not to call them people. And so each one of us have a duty until there is a structured collective that makes a decision on that. But until then, each person do have the choice according to the experiences that they know. Now, as far as your second question, which is, do we have the right? You have to be yourself. You are duty bound to be yourself, okay? And until you are yourself, what rights are? You see, right now, we are looking at everything with minimum. We're looking at with two heads or two ways. We have their way, which is in us through education, religion, et cetera, and then we have our own way that we are discovering and aspiring to. So until we reach a point where we know who we are, then there are decisions that we cannot take because we do not know, we don't have knowledge of our rights and our duties. You have to have rights and responsibilities clear before you can take decisions. So that's why it's most important for us today to work on the knowledge of self. That's the key. Until you have enough of the knowledge of self, of the self-control, the self-determination, the vision, can you look back 7 generations? If you can look back 7 generations, then you can take a decision that will go 7 generations ahead. But if you're not even clear on the little you present, how can you determine what should be for the next 7 generations? And that's where we want to be. Know ourselves, our divine self, sufficiently that even if we have a decision that will come into effect 21 generations from now or 101 generations from now, it will still be just. That's where you want to go. My opinion.
Thank you very much, my Bello. And I would like to hear from Professor Small on that question. And to add a little bit, I do have that genealogy on, I would say, all sides of my family tree in this country, at least 7 generations. So I'll start unpacking more so I can figure out where I want to go in the future. Thank you.
And peace and blessings to the spirit of Conrad. Conrad and I have been friends for nearly 40 years. We did a lot of fighting, traveling, planning, meeting together. Got to talk to him about a month before he made his transition, but left a message every other day or so on the phone because I know he could hear it. you know, you remind me a little bit of me when I was your age, you know, with that fire. But Dr. Noble says history will erase the mystery. I truly don't believe we can defeat this beast acting like the beast. Okay. We made a fundamental mistake. If we go back to ancient Kemet and study the history, when Tutmosis, in ousting the last of the Hyksos, took our armies all the way into Rome, into France. Most people don't realize the Egyptian pharaoh went all the way into Russia to cleanse ourselves of them. But the fundamental mistake the next generation made was to adopt their way of responding to tyranny instead of reconstructing our way and adding what new weaponry we needed, of course, because it's like a good martial artist. You know, people who study Kung Fu think it's about fighting. That's the least of what Kung Fu is about. Kung Fu is a philosophical, spiritual system. The fighting art was created to protect the institution of the philosophical spirit, which is carried in the body of the priest and the priestess. So for us as African Americans, there's 3 areas we must always focus on: economics, political, cultural. We must focus on, as Malcolm said, land is the base of all revolution, and that's taking control of the land, the labor of our people, and the resources where we reside, wherever we reside in the world. You can be in Harlem and have an African nation, but you've got to own that real estate, and you've got to own those businesses, and you've got to control those policemen, because you're now going to be the one who is hiring and firing them, and you got to determine who's going to be on that city council seat. And if there's nobody out there that looks like a suitable for us, then you run. Learn the political system.
All right.
Take it over. And so revolution means to re-evolve. And that's where Bayyinah was saying we have to go back those 7 generations. We had a lot of victories against this demonic system. Extraordinary victories. But not knowing our history, we can't learn from our victories. And when we look back to time, you will see we've had some extraordinary victories. He hasn't always won. And even when he's won the major battle, we scored many fundamental victories in that process as well. So we need to build on the victories that is based on the principles that our ancestors left for us as being solid to build a nation that cannot be intruded upon by these outside forces.
Thank you so much, Baba and Mama Bello. And I will be sending you, Baba, Dr. Conrad Worrell's final address to our National Convention for National Black United Front that took place last summer. So you will have that today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jade. Thank you, Jade, so much. And thanks for your activism. Thanks for everything that you're doing out there on the front lines. And also thanks for your support. Jade buys all my books. All right, let's see. Okay, next is Royal Sparkles. Royal Sparkles, you go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Oh, on everybody. Greetings. I actually have 2 questions. I did have to take a call, so if it went through the video already, just dismiss the questions, and I'm gonna rewatch it anyways, as I usually do. One question is regarding economics. That's actually my major. And I've been trying for a long time to just buy Black as much as possible. One of the things that I realize is that a lot of times when you can even go on WeBuyBlack.com and they're selling Tide. And I'm like, okay, that's not Black, but it's on the thing. And with the same issue, buying Black, and they end up utilizing that money in the white community, or they have a white wife and she gets the money as well. How do we differentiate when we're trying to support each other economically is the first part. And this question is actually for both of you. And the second part is, it was my understanding that the United States of America is incorporated. So whether we think we own anything, I don't really believe we can. So if you can just kind of speak on that, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
You want to go first? Or you want me to go, Mama Bello?
Go ahead, Brother James.
Yeah, I wouldn't give that thing of being incorporated the weight people are giving it. Who are they incorporated with? You know, the District of Columbia is incorporated, not the United States. The District of Columbia, which is a piece of land that sits within the city of Washington, D.C. See, the District of Columbia is separate from Washington, D.C. It's like a miniature nation state that sits in the middle of Washington, D.C. Because one would ask, well, who are they incorporated with? Then there must be some bigger body, you know, but sometimes we can play ourselves. What you are able to take and control belongs to you, okay? We live in communities. If you are spending $1 trillion a year, you're making $1 trillion a year somehow. The fundamental question is, you're doing something with that $1 trillion. What is it that you're doing? If it is not taking your riches and creating wealth for your community, then you're doing something fundamentally wrong. And then the fundamental issue is the question of identity. See, when we come to question of identity, African Americans really don't want to have that discussion. So we say, oh, I'm a Moor, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, no, you're an African, damn it. And it doesn't matter what your complexion, okay? You're an African. And you have a historical experience of 400 years in the same place with a group of people who number now about 50 million, going through the same situation, trying to resolve it in the same way. That's how a community determines who they are in their modernity. But you come out of a histology of the African peoples. And so as African peoples living in America, and the geopolitical way of saying that is African American, just like we would say a Ghanaian American or an Irish American or an Italian American, that's not a contradiction. We make it a contradiction because we don't want to own the African part of it. See, because the African part is the race part. The African part is the culture part. The African part is the worldview part. The African part is the ideological part. The African part is the spiritual part. And in order to go to the African part, we got to give up all that shit that we carry with us, from the Soras to the fraternities to the religions, etc., that form how we view the world. And that's where the problem comes in. Our elite belongs to subdivision of white elitist organizations that form our values, our interests, and our principles. And they fight to preserve this Greco whatever against anything African that is fundamentally philosophical, that is fundamentally ideological, that is fundamentally spiritual. We are not attacked by white people on those issues. We're attacked by other Black people on those issues. And if you can't create an identity from those spaces, you can't create a polity or politics, nor can you create an economics that will sustain itself. Because who are you creating it for? Because you don't exist. You must first exist as a people, as a whole people. That's one of the examples we can take from Haiti. That's one of the examples we can take from listening to Dessalines. Listen to the last speeches, listen to some of the writings. They're making it clear this is an identity question. Even when he was dealing with the Poles and the Italians, he said, y'all gonna be Black. He didn't tell, he said, y'all gonna be using an identity that we have created and assumed for ourselves. And anyone that escaped slavery and come to this place and is willing to assume this identity, we guarantee you freedom. And so African Americans have to really realize, if you got $1 trillion to trash around and make all the Asian folks rich, make the Koreans rich, make the Arab rich, and if you look at almost every shooting that happened as a result of somebody being in a store or something, it's always been an Arab that call. The one who says salam alaikum to us every day. And I'm saying, I don't want to put that on all Arab people, but I got a call to question when an incident keeps replicating itself from Ferguson to Minnesota. And in each case, it was a lie or a mistake. But the black man is dead, and the community is again damaged. Now let's call the question, why someone who I give 100% of my business to, he makes 100% of his money from me, cannot ally with me. He's always allied with my oppressors. And you can't even raise that question when you don't have an identity that demands your space, that demands your control over your space where you live, that has an ideology based on your spirituality and based on your culture to determine your worldview. What I mean by worldview is how I view everybody else outside of my group, based on what they've done to me, what kind of relationships they had with me, what kind of value they have to me now, and what kind of danger do they present to me. I have to develop a worldview based on that. And we don't have it. A few of us in small pockets and revolutionary organizations do, but we've got 50 million people that don't have a clue. There's shattered consciousness and broken Black identity. Needs to be repaired. And history and studying African sacred science that we call spirituality is the only path I know to start that healing process.
Thank you, Baba.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. All I have to add to this, know yourself. Till you know yourself, you cannot take one good decision about yourself. Okay. When we look at how much we spend buying hair, Chinese hair, buying Indian hair, buying nails, what happened? Were you created without nails? Why do you need to buy nails? You have them already. Let's be for real. We say, you know, you want to fight for something, but you don't know what you have. So let's know ourselves. Let's work hard every day about the knowledge of self. Remember from some other things that we did together. Breathing is vital. Train your body to breathe well. Take deep breath every morning, every night. Besides doing all the good it will do for you physically, it will also help you contact the forces within. So breathe. Drink water, plenty of it, not cold, not soda. So you have enough in your body for your circulation to be proper. From Dambala, we learned that life is made of flexibility and movement. So don't just sit here. As you sit, go ahead and move that body. In the morning, before I get off my bed, I pick up my feet, put them up while I lay on the bed. So I say thank you to my feet for carrying me all these years. And also because I know there's a lot of women and men my age have feet problem, knee problem. So I figured one of the things is that we don't put it up enough. It's always holding all of us, but we don't hold it. We don't say thank you to it. That's about being fair. So be fair to your body. We start the justice right here in our own body. Then we will start spreading it in the family and spreading it around us and making more intelligent decisions what we do with our money. Be fair to yourself. Use your money to share. Remember we saw 1221. We said through the mouth of our emperor in Mali, in the Empire of Mali, he said what? Everyone is responsible for the one next to him. Let's see. You do not have the right to harm the one that is next to you. If you do harm the person next to you, you are duty bound for reparation. It's all in there. They told us how to live with each other. There will be no famine in our empire, was declared in 1221. Everyone is responsible that everybody in the family has what they need. The rules are there. Those are the rules we need to apply so they become part of us. And then when we develop power from that kind of regulations, then that power will know exactly what to do with those who want to handicap the well-being of our planet, because we are responsible for our planet. We are not, our country is not, my country is not Haiti. Yeah, I was born here. And I love Haiti. But when I hear this going on in Togo, that going on in South Africa, this going on, I don't care where, in the Amazonie, they're about destroying the forest there. That is a concern to me. And I have to figure out what can I do to put a stop to it. But before, I must build Bayyinah. I must take all the Bayyinahs that live here. Every morning, I must tell them, fuse together so you become nothing but force, power, and puissance. Fuse together. So when I can make this Bayyinah do this work, then Bayyinah and James can fuse together if James has work on the fusion. Then Bayyinah and Jade can do it. Jade, Bayyinah, and James and Franz can do it. Franz, Bridget, Bayyinah, Luckner can do it. But we each have to work doing it for ourselves separately, developing our forces, our powers, our puissance. Then we will be ready to deal with whatever we have to justly, not copying other people's inhumane behavior, justly.
Thank you, Bello.
Merci, man.
Merci en pile pour nous toutes.
All right. Thank you for the question, Alicia. Okay, next we have Mario Goose. Please unmute yourself. You can ask your question now.
My goodness, I didn't expect that to be coming up so quickly. May I say honneur and respect to Mama Bayyinah.
Honneur et respect.
And to brother Professor James Small, my mentor from way, way, way back. And this family has just been coming back together. It's almost like I was lost in the wilderness and now I'm back. I am a son of Africa. And that's how Brother James became to be my mentor. And I'm proud to call myself so even at this point, even though we don't have the physical or the frequent linkings, but there's a son of Africa still here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this is a sacred and important gathering that we're having here, that we've been having, and Fran's excellent work of coordinating and then putting this together and keeping it going and fending off attacks from the enemy, electronic ones.
He has a whole team. They're fusing on this. There's a team working.
In the team, yeah, that's right. See, you're saying well hidden, but being very active. Well done. My question is not much of a question. I would just like both Mama Bayyinah and Professor Small just to say, what do you say about us at this point, many of us being having to be self-isolated, etc., forming reading, discussion, study groups with each other, and these same groups that we carry them, keep them going, but for these groups to evolve into action groups where we can take different types of action, educational, economic, political, and even form ourselves into self-defense groups, community defense groups, because some of the things happening around us that have been happening for all the time, we've been under the hegemony of these people. we have to be the ones policing and defending and safeguarding ourselves and be a presence. Whenever they show up, we show up. Black Panther style, so that we are very much the ones, the presence to be seen at all times in our neighborhoods and communities. I just wonder what you might want to say to us about that, so we can take it in turns, take it any way you would like to.
Well, greetings, Brother Maurice.
Greetings.
I was trying to figure out who's this man. He looks so familiar from the time he came on. It's good to see you, sir.
Likewise.
I think all of the things you said were good and positive. One, we should use this time to contemplate, to read, to study, to do research, and to, two, set up study groups. Start with your family, then expand it to your friends, and keep them going. Three, I agree fully. You know, we talked about self-defense from day one. We had our martial arts teachers and everything. We were stick fighting in the Sons of Africa, you know, all the while we were in school and trying to teach you younger brothers. So there should always be a self-defense component to anything. And some of it exists, but we're a big people. You know, we're almost 50 million people here in the United States. So we can't treat us like we're a little group, because we're not. You know, when the young man got shot in Georgia, the sisters, there was a group of armed sisters that led armed sisters and brothers through that community, a couple of hundred of them. And when those people came into that state house in the Midwest with their guns, the right wingers, well, the next week, armed Black men went and escorted the Black elected officials into that state house. So we do have some of that. We need it everywhere we are. Wherever we reside, there should be a self-defense component to our communities. And then the other thing we got to take time to do is figure out, coming back to the economic point the sister made, and then I'll shut up. And what makes history so beautiful, when you study history, you run across a lady like Maggie Walker, you know, an extraordinary African woman who became a banker, whose mom was enslaved. I think she was born just at the end of slavery, but she built one of the biggest Black banks in America and one of the biggest banks in Virginia by the time the stock market crash came in 1929. And she started with a penny, the Penny Savings Association, she and other brothers and sisters. And so they call those things today, what do you call it when you,
penny stocks?
No, credit union.
Credit unions, yes.
And so we can start credit unions. Most people don't know the federal government will actually pay and train you for free to learn how to set up a credit union. The state government have funds to train you for free to learn how to set up credit unions. And a credit union don't have to have direct deposits initially. You have to have pledge for deposits up to a certain amount. So if you can get the written amount of pledges, you can get the license. You do need some capital, of course, to get your facility and to secure and that sort of thing. But credit union is the pathway communities can take that the banking, you don't have to tie into their banking system in that direct way. And it's not that difficult to set up credit unions. We've got other kinds of ways we use to make money. So as a group, we can come together and use all of the different methodologies we brought from the Caribbean and from the United States on how to save money to help this one buy a house in the family, this one buy a house, and so forth. We have to go back to using some of these old ways, okay? That doesn't involve the American banking system because they won't let us into it anyway in any significant way. And so I think that's one path. Study groups is an absolute must. Setting up after-school programs for our children so we can tutor them in science and math. We don't need a building for it. It could be in our living room. It could be on the hallway in our houses, okay? And you can expand it to the neighbors and the others, because all of us have some skills we can use with these children. Those pieces I think is essential. Reading and contemplating our history, getting a greater understanding of our history and our culture. Don't be afraid of our culture. Voodoo is our heaven. It's a way out. You understand? People got us running. The gate is over there wide open, and they got us running to the burning wall in the back. No, head for that gate called Voodoo, or Yoruba, or Akan, or Dogon, or Congo. In those systems of understanding the universe and the human mind's relationship to it, that's our freedom. That's our ancestors' minds talking to us.
Oh, Brother James, you made me, Miss
thanks.
Rose, so happy. Miss Rose jumped up when you said voodoo is heaven. Absolutely.
I don't know if I should say amen, hallelujah. I share everything. When he said that, I jumped up. Aibobo, I felt that. I felt it. Thank you so much.
It's our heaven.
That was very
Yes.
clear. Okay. But if I was to just resume a little bit what my brother just said, stop in the family. Whatever you need to do, if we are 5 in the family, then there's a possibility to do an economic program with together. We each are gonna give $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever it is. Then how about the neighbor next door? How about the neighbor across the street? We can involve, like there are 10 houses in this block. If we put a little bit of money together for whatever purpose, we choose whatever it is. We also look out for each other. I know that last year, my children's father and his wife, they told us how they were on vacation and somebody entered their home and started stealing. Their neighbor just took a shotgun and shot, and he could hardly see the person, but he knew this person coming out of that house was not them because he knew they were away. So he just shot the shotgun up. So the young folks who had gone into the house ran away and left whatever they had taken right on the yard. That's what happened when you have, that you're talking about security. We're thinking in terms of blah, 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 blah. The first thing is looking out for each other. That's security number 1. I know that my neighbor is not there. If I see somebody going in or going out, before I even call police or anything, let me do something to protect my neighbor. So the older person crossing the street with difficulty, it is security when you can grab their arm and help them cross the street. That is security to our own, giving to each other. So there are a million things we can do in as far as food, shelter, security, economy, within whatever group. We are what? Right now we are 110 people here. Let's say there was something that needed to be done. 110 people is a big group if we truly are together. If there was whatever reason for us to say, all right, we need to do this afternoon, how many of you would respond? Many of us are programmed. That's one of the things I don't like about this whole electronic thing. We're programmed to give likes. We're programmed to say, yeah, down with but are we programmed to act on a decision? Are we programmed to say, okay, let's do blah, blah, blah tomorrow, next month, whatever it is? That's the part we need to develop. We need to really work at it. If we say, I could give a test. If I say, okay, I want everybody here to send us $5. If you don't have it, it's not a problem. But if we were to say something, if there was a need for something, or school is opening in IT next week, not true, I'm just saying. We need to give pencils and papers, notebooks to children. 100 people, can each one of you send 10? We're going to give to the school next door. Can we do that? It's not a big thing. But we have to have the mind that when there is something serious to be done, and it needs all of us. There's a saying in IT, "Mais en pile chai palou." When there are many hands, the load is easy, it's not heavy. Well, that is the kind of thinking we need to do. There's so much that can be done. The first wealth for me is all of you. The first wealth for you is all of us. And if we are the number one wealth that we have, then we must be able to count on each other for whatever the reason might be. And when you are yourself, you understand basic life. I take and I give. I take and I give. That is the only way to stay alive. So in every way, shape, or form, we take and we give. So please, as you work on building yourselves, don't ever stop. Continue to grow. Continue to accept yourself, to love yourself each day more, but love everything that looks like you. Love the young, love the old, love the men, love the women, love the one that annoys you. Yeah, sometimes you're gonna have the ones that annoys you. He has to annoy you. That's one of the tests. One of the tests you're gonna have. Yeah, woo, boy, every time Brother Mario calls, oh my goodness, what? Yeah, but still, it's Brother Mario. I have to respond because he's my brother. And we all trying to become ourselves. None of us have arrived. We are working at it. So please work every day. Give security to each other. Even someone you don't know, you're walking down the street and you see this other person a little further down the way. And it looks like this person that came in between the two of you is not all that clear. Maybe just bumping your horn might help. Making a noise, letting him know that you are there might help. If we're thinking in terms of security, there are a million ways we can do it. So please, but most of all, as Professor Small said, all right, right to you. I have 108 people. How many did we say we wanted this week, Franz? How many people were we expecting this week, Franz?
500.
Have we fallen short? We're welcoming Professor James Small with just 110 people. We didn't do very well at all.
You've done extraordinarily well.
We didn't do well at all. I'm not satisfied at all. How can we form an army with less than 500? Come on. We got to do better than that.
Well, most of the people can't get through security.
Mama.
The problem.
Yes.
I see.
All right, so let's, we have a lot of questions left and we're already in overtime.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And I may have to leave you in about 10 minutes.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Okay, all right, so let's go into the lightning round, right? So with the questions.
Quick questions, quick answers.
Quick questions, quick answers. Thank you.
No comments.
All right, Sherry, you could go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Thank both of you. I really enjoy being with you on Thursdays, especially Professor Small. Professor Small, I'd like to know, you got any ideas for a tentative new date on your trip to Ghana in July? And also, can you or any of you all recommend the best service for tracing your ancestry? And I know there's an African-American service, but you have to have your father's bloodline, and I have no one. And that's the Africanity in me. They say they can't help me. So those are my two questions.
Okay, well, the first one, we're using the same date in July 21 because we want to let this COVID thing pass.
Right.
So we're going to keep, we could add some expansions to the trip into northern Ghana as well as Egypt, Ghana. But we're going to do a little bit more so people can have a 3-week option, a 1-week option, a 2-week option.
Okay.
But that's 21 to make sure it's safe to travel abroad.
Right.
And with the, what was the last piece you said?
I want to trace my ancestry. I hear that Ancestry.com is BS, that the government has banned them from telling you about Native American ancestry and different things like that. So I don't know who to trust. I know there's an African American service that needs my father's bloodline, but I have no one alive.
I did AfricanAncestry.com, and they traced me through my mother's bloodline.
Well, see, my mother's European. I'm really not interested in that. You know?
No, you'd be surprised that Europe will turn out to be more of a place than a race. Do it.
Well, because, you know, I have some of those pictures at least, but I have nothing on African.
Mother, do you know your father?
My father, my grandparents.
Yeah, they can trace you to your, let me see, you have to go, you have an auntie.
No, no, I can count my relatives on one hand, always could.
You get into, write down my email and I'll help you with that one. It's AAMPONS like Sam, A3@gmail.com. Reach out to me later and then I'll help you resolve.
Thank you. AMPONSA3@gmail.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, you could expect about 107 emails in a few minutes.
That'd be good, and I'll get the answers because it could be done.
All right. All right, thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. Remember, we're in the lightning round. Marjorie, you could go ahead and unmute and ask a question, please. Marjorie Sham. Marjorie, you still there? Marjorie going once.
I'm here.
Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me? I apologize. One.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, all. Blessings. It's my first time and I'm very happy. I'm so happy. So much information. I feel like I'm a newbie. My question is, Professor Small, yes, you mentioned something about 8 times coming back to come and go. Can you elaborate on that? Is that possible? And you also mentioned that you can tell your ancestors how they come back, and there's ways that you can tell which one they are from your grandchildren. So how can you tell that?
Well, you have to know your elders and you have to know your ancestors. That's what, you know, and the way they did it in say, Nigeria and in Ghana, that's why they had outdooring. The baby didn't come out for 8 days because they'd call all the elders in. They called all the elders of the family, the village, to see what qualities this child possessed of any ancestors that have gone. And they would assess all of the varied qualities they saw in the child. And they would decide directly which ancestor has returned. Then they would name the child. Then they would bring them and present them to the community. This is Kojo. This is Adebayo. This is, you know, Amana, who have returned.
Wow. Okay.
And so, but you can tell from this look, you can tell from look, and you can tell from behavior. I've got a child that acts literally like my mama. And almost does. Come here. This is her.
Okay.
This is her. This is Mia. This is my mother. You know, besides looking like her, she does so many of the things that she wouldn't go to bed at night without come to take my tray. Let me wash your dishes for you. All the things this little girl does. With the same spirit. It's the spirit which she brings.
Wow.
My mother was a cosmetologist. She did hair. This baby's got hair. She's 10 years old now, but she's been sitting down for the last 3 years, unbraiding all that hair, combing all of it out, parting it, washing it, twisting it, all by herself.
Okay.
You know, she got hair like you, Bayyinah. She got a hair, right? And my mother, that's what my mother did. And she does it with such joy, and this is nothing. So you look for the qualities of the person and the habits of the person, even some of the things they like to eat or they like to drink, or sometimes, believe it or not, you can smell the person. Give off that person's body smell. So it's multiple things. But really, just to keep these things short, it is the Yorubas who have a concept called aloha.
Aloha, okay.
And Ibi is the word that means a family, an Ibi.
Ibi,
so
Aloha.
When you're born into an Ibi, at the very beginning of your family line, that is the only Ibi you will ever return back to in a growth and expansion of that line. And they said you have 8 times to come. I think it's 12 processes or qualities you have to develop in those 8 times. And if you develop them, you move into another stage where you don't have to come back no more. You become one of the revered ancestors that helped create the other ones to come back. But if you don't, and you finish the 8 and you didn't get it right, then you got another 8. Come back.
Going back.
So that's so you can look. It's under the Yoruba tradition, and there's a lot of good readings and good books by Yoruba scholars that we should read. I would say people don't join any religion. Study the history and the foundation first, then learn to identify good practitioners and go and spend some time interviewing them before you join something and become a part of it.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mama Bello. Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome, my dear.
All right. Thank you, Marjorie. All right, let's see. Next is Palomar. Palomar.
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Honor. I want to say merci. Thank you, Bello. Thank you, Professor Small and friends. Thank you for having these webinars and sharing so much knowledge with us. It's truly appreciated. So my question is this. We know that the history of the US is built on racism, injustice, and unfairness towards Blacks. When taking a look back at our history, it's been shown that all the protests and marches, they've made some progress. However, racism is still subtly legal. We've made some progress, but we are still living in a country where racism is very much alive. And personally, I share the same view as a Beninese brother who is a great Pan-Africanist leader. His name is Kemi Seba. And he always talks about separating from the oppressors and returning back home, wherever that may be, whether it's Haiti, Jamaica, or returning to the motherland, Africa. So my question is, what are your thoughts on that? Returning home and bettering our own countries instead of thinking that we have no other choice but to live with the oppressors.
Very quickly, very simply, absolutely. But the first returning home is regaining your own self. If you return home the way you are here, you're just gonna carry the mess that is going on here. You're gonna do it at home. We don't want it. So we have to work and build and create and regain ourselves. Then wherever we are will be a better place, wherever we are. So go back home, the inner home first, gain that. And then definitely, and just think, imagine 1 minute that all the Haitians, the Jamaicans, the Africans said they were living in the United States tomorrow. Do you think the US government would like it?
No.
That's one of the powers you have, and you haven't used it yet.
Thank you.
Let me just make one comment. I own the world. There's no place on the planet Earth where the African isn't the Aborigine. The place that we call the continent is our genesis, as far as we know to date. The greatest cultures that we built them there and in Central South America. And in parts of Asia, because sometimes we kind of block out from our contributions in India and China and those places. We own this world, and I declare the right to plant my feet anywhere on planet Earth and declare my right to be in that space and defend my right to be there. Some may want to go home, it would be more comfortable and peaceful, yes. But as Sister Bayyinah says, we can't go home as the white man. We've got to become ourselves and go back home as ourselves. Otherwise, we will cause trauma. And they're suffering from the same white supremacy in Ghana. There was a white man that opened a bar, a jazz club, and said no Africans was allowed in Ghana 2 years ago. Well, the people had to go and tear it up. But the fact that he had the audacity, something is going on that he felt it was cool for him to do this. South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, the whites are all there by the millions. They didn't go anywhere when we won the Revolutionary Wars. And they still own the best community, the best neighborhoods, the best land, the best farms in our countries.
Yep.
So we fight white supremacy in our own minds, in our hearts.
Indeed.
And we can have the world revolution without leaving our location. And that's what we've been doing for years. We helped Mozambique, we helped MPLA in Angola, we helped Frelimo in Mozambique, we helped SWAPO in South Africa, PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau. We were doing that from the Caribbean, from the United States, sending money, helping train their people, sending them back homes. We can fight the revolution from wherever we are, but we have to have the right mind.
That's it.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Paloma. All right, we have a few more questions. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 more questions left. So Ankobia, you could go ahead, unmute and ask me.
Yes, greetings.
Look at you.
Yeah.
Hello, Mama.
Glad to see you.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. I've been enjoying all of your get-togethers. In particular, when you join with Professor Small, I always feel like I'm in the company of Mum and Dad, my spiritual mother and father. Wow, a lot has been going on in the African world. Just to touch on the last point you mentioned, I think we can live, some of us can live in Africa and in America or the UK. You know, I'm here in the UK. For us as Africans in the UK, I think for a lot of us, the only place to go is Africa, because we're never going to get on an even playing field. It's not going to happen. So I don't mind taking what bit of myself I have back to Africa and finding the rest of myself there. But the question I really wanted to ask, we've been watching a lot about these demonstrations that's been happening. We've seen some of the TV debates that's going on. One thing I never hear in any of these discussions, in any of these demonstrations, I never hear the talk of power. No one seems to mention about power. And the reason why somebody can put their knee on another person's neck is because the person who's on the floor being held down lacks the power to be able to get the person's knee off his neck. And that's our situation globally. We lack the power. We seem to be very concerned with wanting a slice of the cake, as I heard somebody, a Hollywood actor, talking this week. Just give us a slice of the cake. Give us what our ancestors worked for. You know, we want to be accepted and validated by Europeans. And I think that's sort of, it's the wrong mentality altogether. We need to be, as Dr. Amos Wilson said, talking about power. Power only understands power. Anything else is a joke, really, power. So my question to both of you is, how do we get our people to love ourselves back to power? How do we get our people to think in terms of power 24/7? That's my question to both of you. And I thank you for doing this wonderful meeting for us all to come together from across the African world. It's wonderful. Thank you.
I would say the shortest answer is, we've gone to school and got conditioned instead of education. And in the conditioning, we got a process that says, I'm weak, I don't know, I'm ugly, I'm blah, 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 all the content. So if you want to change the content, you have to become yourself. And become yourself, you have to get rid of all the references that are not you. And you have to replace them with references that are your own. And immediately that you begin to become yourself, it will be about force, power, puissance. The power of the snake. Snake don't run after nobody. The snake knows who it is. And when something comes into the snake's environment, the snake will take you whether with its tail or with its mouth, but it will take you. Because it is cold, cool, collected, and knows its power. The power of the ant can defeat even the elephant, because the ant knows who it is. When it sees a snake, it sees a rat. It doesn't say, oh, one ant sees a rat, oh, we're gonna, It looks at it and says, oh, we need 10, 20,000 of us to carry this away, and sends the word out. And so the ant will take away whatever it is that it wants to carry, because it knows itself. So there is no greater power than the knowledge of self. Then you determine what weapons you want to use, et cetera, et cetera. But the knowledge of self is the very first source of power. If you look in the mirror and you see yourself ugly, you are weak. If you look in the mirror and you find yourself wanting, when you compare yourself to someone else, you're weak. You have to be you. When you are you, you determine things according to your forces, your strength. Brother James.
Thank you.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. The only thing I would add is telling Kobe it's good to see her. She found me asleep in the airport the last time I was in Birmingham, and she took care of me.
You did.
That concept that Wade says, power is the ability to define your reality and have others accept your definition of that reality as if it were their own. And the reason you don't see people are talking about power and people are raising that issue, but the same people we're fighting on the TV, they're not going to have me on the show. They're not going to have Leonard Jeffries on the show. They're not going to have Bayyinah on the show to talk about none of this stuff. They bring their little college-trained Negroes who are not going to cross certain lines. It's not going to reach beyond integration into the American non-melting pot. Those of us who understand that we are Africans, and that's what we are. It isn't something we want to be, that's what we are. So how do we learn to know how we are that? That's what Bayyinah is talking about, to know how we are that, because that's the power. If we withdraw $200 billion, so $300 billion of that $1 trillion we spend, this economy would collapse.
Baba.
Not organized enough to withdraw that capital, because to be organized, you must have an identity that has cohesion, and it can't be just based on color.
Baba, at the time our ancestors were attacked in Africa, didn't they have a knowledge of self? Didn't they know they were Africans at that time? Didn't they have an African worldview? Didn't they have an African cosmology?
They had all of that, but they did not have the technology of gun warfare. That was not a part of our lifestyle, because we were not murder cults. We didn't have, people like to talk about the African warrior. That's a myth. Very few African states had the concept of a warrior, okay? We were farmers. We were herdsmen. We were fishers. We didn't have to have standing army because we did not kill human beings unnecessarily. One of the most shocking things, if you study the story of Bambata, the general of the Zulus, or the story of Sechueya, they both had major military defeats against the British until the British introduced the automatic gun called a Gatling gun. And what the African had never seen, that in 5 seconds you can kill 5,000 people. It was beyond any comprehension of their worldview. So they stopped fighting, because to commit that many people to death, and you don't even understand how. if there's a PBS had a thing called the history of the gun. We can't separate the gun from the Europeans' victory, nor the European propensity to take human life without cause. Africans didn't take human life without cause. And it's hard to comprehend if your concept of God includes the other person and then you can kill it. Doesn't work in your brain like that. It still doesn't. Those of us who can do that, we've given up the African brain and we enter the European brain. So you see it on the streets of America in the inner city where people have just been so stressed, depressed, and the only way of acting is a white way of acting, and that is about taking human lives. Mm-hmm. That's not our culture. That's not our value system. But now that that has happened in history, we must compensate for that shortcoming. But we learned in the 60s, those of us who struggle in the Caribbean and here with the arms, without giving myself a way to go to prison or anything, we're not going to defeat them that way. They're the master of that way of killing. We have to really believe that there is something in our culture that can now adjust itself, that we didn't have a chance to adjust then because we did not expect a gun. What is it in our culture that can now adjust itself so that we can destroy this enemy? We in every one of his house, we're still cooking most of their foods. We're in their restaurants, we're in the kitchen. What will tell us how to put them to sleep if that was what we want to do?
Then lastly, in the same way that somebody, for example, was asking the question, should Europeans be called humans? Shouldn't the question really be, can we as Africans call ourselves humans if we don't have the ability to protect ourselves and defend ourselves?
No, wrong question. To tie that question like that is to say that we can be like the inhuman and it's human. It's not. How can the human being take that step back and look at the individual that is acting not like a human being and figure out what to do about it? We haven't done it because we haven't taken that step back and made the separation between the two. When they came to Africa, we didn't kill them. We invited them to sit down and have a meal, to have a drink, to rest themselves, to rest their head, to put themselves to sleep. When we went to their place, they chopped our heads off. We've got to know the difference between the two levels of consciousness. This isn't about human being in terms of color of skin. This is about spiritual consciousness. Most of us really don't have a clue about what spiritual consciousness is about. And that is a place, and I'll say it like this, the easiest way to say it, when the thing we call God decided to manifest as human, it manifests as a Black woman. Now that thing, when this universe decided to manifest as a human being, it manifests. It's the universe that made that manifestation into the thing we call the human. Then there is a depreciation due to mutation. The whites represent the most extreme element of mutation on the human gene pool. There's all kinds of other problems, but we don't have to go into the details of the problems. We can deal with the action. The action is they will take rather than barter. And we have to learn to defend ourselves from the takers. And we haven't done that yet. This little 400 years is no time. We've been here a couple of billion years. So we have 400 years of some really bad moments, but we need to correct it. But we're not going to correct it becoming them. Because whenever we become them, we've gone into self-destruction. Look at any African nation, any Caribbean nation that decided to move and become as the European nation, we just become slaves again. The path we've never taken since the modern incursion, you know, we had the Greeks, we had the Romans, we had the Syrians, we had those other incursions, but this modern incursion that involved Western Union, the path not taken as a return to African spirituality. We always say, let's get better at killing than them and call it revolution. Hasn't won any way we've used it. Even in Haiti, when we used that weapon, they killed the other weapon when they killed Dessalines, the spiritual weapon. Because once we use that physical weapon to move that first barrier, We had something else we had to get rid of. It's him and me. But your Boye, your Petion, and the others, they did not want to dislodge themselves from that Catholic Church. They did not want to dislodge themselves from the French culture. They did not dislodge themselves completely enough. So that thing, because even the white man has a spirit, that thing that is him is in us. And it's hard to let it go because we think we're going to be weak if we let it go. Let's try Africa for once and see if it really works. Let's try to find out, what does voodoo really mean? What really is voodoo? Not the beads, not a few rituals, not the colors. Past all of that, what the heck are we talking about? And when you get to that core and that depth of Kobe, because I know your spirit. I know when it walks in a room. And I know some of what has gone on in the UK over the years, over the centuries. That thing that we call the voodoo, that thing is more than a religion. That thing is more than rituals. That thing is actually a bonding consciously and knowingly with the forces of the universe itself, and knowing how to use it. But we've got to get it back. We lost much of its utility in the struggles we've been forced to be engaged in. We've got enough time now. Let's find that strength again, how to employ it again. Because being like them is self-destruction. Ain't gonna work. We could be like them. Instead of being here with you, I could have been one of the wealthiest Black men in America. On a serious note, that's not what I want. I'm eternal. When I give up this body, I'm still coming. I will still come and go. And I want to be pure. I want to be a part of the totality of creation itself knowingly. And I'm struggling for that. That's what the knowledge is about. But the part we call the spirit, the voodoo, you know, and then I'll end. In the Ewe language, I saw them use voodoo twice. Voodoo Gazi and voodoo Daha. And one, voodoo Gazi, means the essence of the totality of the universe, the divine in me. And the other means the essence of the totality of the universe of divine in nature. And the voodoo aspect of that as a prefix is the divine itself. The totality of creation itself is voodoo. And so, you know me, you feel me, even through the screen.
Definitely.
That's our weapon.
And that's not technology.
That's our weapon.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor Small.
Thank you both. God bless you both.
Love you. Good to see you.
Thank you, brother, for hosting the event. And love to both of you, Mama and Papa Baba. Love you both. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We love you. You know that, Kobia.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Professor Small, I know you said that.
Because I got to jump in a car and drive to Brooklyn.
Okay.
But I'm happy to have been with you today. And Bayyinah, you know, I missed you 24/7. I could talk to you every day, fall asleep, wake up, start talking to you. Because the woman she's like the tree of life, you know, and all of this energy and knowledge and wisdom. She comes up with a new body of wisdom every day that we need to tap into and learn from our ancestors. And France, I just love you. When I first met you, I go, who's this guy? You know, but I've watched you, I go like, I love him. He's cool. He's my son. He's all right. And all of the brothers and sisters on the call today, thank you all for being on the call. We'll be back again with some more understanding that we're trying to bring to you. So now I have to go and play husband and granddaddy and a few other things. Those things well too.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you so much. We love you too.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mama.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mama Bello.
Merci.
Thank you, Franz.
All the best. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Everyone.
Franz.
Everybody
Thank
be
you,
safe.
Mama Bello. Thank you.
Mom,
Are we done?
We're
I
not
don't know
quite
if you wanted to take them or if you want to save it for next time.
Not quite done. We have a couple things that I will share with you since your family. Probably to do it a little earlier, but that is gonna, things have a good reason for being done the way they are done. Number one, I have to tell you that I lost my sister, Mima Gloire, my younger sister, and my godchild this week on Sunday.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. But
My condolences, Mama.
Mama, you muted.
Yes, condolences to you, Mama. Condolences. I'm so sorry.
Condolences, Mama, but you muted.
Condolences.
Unmute yourself.
Okay, everyone. Let's. My Bella wants to share something with us, so let's all mute ourselves, and I'll unmute her right now. Okay.
thank you very much. Okay, so I wanted to share with you that yes, my younger sister and goddaughter has transitioned, and it is a victory because when she was born, doctors say she would not last 1 year. And one day my mother was crying that her child is, she's not gonna have this child for long. And I said to my mom, well, I wanna be the godmother and she will live. Well, she is 53. She was not supposed to live 1 year. And to me, it's a great victory that she lasted all this time. And the second thing I will share with you today it was somewhere in May. No, first of all, last August, I lost all of my gold jewelry, every single piece. I don't know if it happened while I was traveling, if they stole it, I have no clue. Anyway, turned the house upside down, not a single piece of gold jewelry. And last May, a week before my mother passed 6 years ago, a week before her birthday, I dreamt she came and said, very angry with me, I went to all the thieves and I collected everything. Here they are. You take care of them now. And I woke up and found my mother's watch in my bed. I did not go to bed with her. I didn't have her watch, but I have the watch now. And opened the drawer where I would normally have, I had all my jewelry, but I didn't have any gold jewelry anymore. Opened the drawer and all the gold jewelry was right there. Every piece. So I should have understood, but I didn't. So that week when my mother's birthday came, I made a special dinner for her. We shared a special meal and celebrated her birthday. But what I missed out is that she had come to really tell me she was coming for May. So almost day for day, a month later, May is gone. And my mother had already, when she had purchased her plot, she put two, one for her, one for me. So life is not just what we see. Life is so much more than that. Listen to yourself, grow, appreciate yourself, appreciate what looks like you, and you will develop into that wonderfully powerful, divine person that you truly are. And in our world of justice and ma'at, we don't have to pick up no weapons. When something has to be gotten rid of on our planet, on our galaxy, we have from within all that is necessary, but we must first become ourselves. We must use our own laws. We must respect the laws of nature. As I read earlier about reparation, seeing that how 1221, we already said reparation for all the wrongs. I also say, not only what must we demand reparation for all that happened to different humans that were destroyed, but we must demand reparation for the trees, for the birds, for every animal that they have destroyed on our planet. But we must build ourselves. Work at you, work in you, work inside you. So when the hour rings, we can quietly, peacefully cleanse our earth from all that is not part of it. Please have a great, powerful week. Grow and grow and grow into your divine self. Be you, and every day do something very kind for someone who looks like you. Peace be unto you, and keep your shield, truth and justice, to protect you. Thank you so very much. It is so great to have this family to meet with you every week, where we all learn from each other. Thanks a lot. Be great, continue to be each day greater than the day before. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ma. We love you, and we appreciate all of your knowledge and wisdom and your willingness to share it with all of us. And we appreciate it, and it won't be for granted. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for logging on to another episode of Bayyinah and Friends. And we will see you next Thursday. See y'all later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mama Baby. Until next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Franz.
We love you. We love you.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, I love you, everyone. Oh, I love you.
Mama Bello.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Professor Small.
All right.
Thank
care.
you.
Look out for the recording.
More power. Peace.
Peace.
Yes.